The alien vessel drifted in the cold void, its scanners pulsing as they bathed the human warship in waves of probing energy. On the bridge of the Virian scout ship, no one spoke at first. They had monitored humanity for decades, watching their chaotic wars, their reckless expansion, their stubborn refusal to kneel before the galactic order. They had watched humans fling ballistic projectiles and crude energy beams across battlefields like savages clawing at a storm. They had seen the old nuclear scars on human worlds and judged the species accordingly. Primitive, emotional, impulsive, dangerous in the way wild animals were dangerous, never in the way empires were. Then the scanner returns finished processing. One of the bridge officers made a choking sound, his crest of spines flattening so quickly it looked painful. "Hi, Captain," he said, voice cracking, "you need to see this." High Captain Zorth stepped forward and fixed his yellow eyes on the tactical display. What he saw did not fit inside anything he believed about humanity. The ship before them, designated Indomitable, was not merely a warship. It was a fortress built by a species that expected the universe itself to come for its throat. Its hull was layered with exotic composite materials designed not simply to endure impact, but to absorb and dissipate energy attacks. The armor was thick enough to suggest siege warfare on a scale no rational species would even plan for. It was as if the humans had looked into the future, found only fire, and built accordingly. Zorth kept reading, and the cold in his bones deepened. The Indomitable bristled with weapons that turned his stomach hard. Rail guns capable of firing projectiles at relativistic speed. Plasma lances designed to shear through the strongest hulls in seconds. Missile banks by the thousands, each carrying warheads that did not merely explode, but warped space itself, collapsing shields and armor as though both were made of paper and pride. Yet even that was not the true horror. No. The true horror lived in the secondary systems, in the details only a species with a diseased imagination would invent. Boarding drones fitted with monomolecular blades and viral hacking protocols. Nanite swarms designed to dissolve flesh and metal alike. And deeper in the system architecture, something marked with a designation that made the officer beside him go pale. Exotroopers. Cybernetic monstrosities engineered from fallen human soldiers, augmented and repurposed into walking engines of extermination. One of the younger officers stared at the data and whispered, "This isn't a warship." No one answered him at first. No one needed to. "It's a nightmare given form," another said. Zorth could not look away. The humans had always fought like cornered beasts, using whatever brutality survival demanded. They had never shown reverence for limits, never cared for the rituals that made war civilized among older species. The galaxy had taken that as proof of their inferiority. But this ship suggested something far worse. It suggested that humanity's chaos had matured into purpose. That all the savagery the Union once mocked had not been discarded. It had been refined, systematized, weaponized. A realization moved across the bridge like poison. For years the galactic powers had argued over humanity. Some believed they should be folded into the existing order and controlled. Others had quietly suggested eradication before the species became troublesome. Most had dismissed them as unworthy of either effort. Too young. Too crude. Too fractured. Zorth had believed that himself. Now he understood the scale of that mistake. The humans had not been stumbling forward in ignorance. They had been preparing. Zorth swallowed and forced breath back into his lungs. "Cut the scanners," he said. The crew moved instantly. "Power down all weapons." Another flurry of motion. "Send a message to the home world." His communications officer turned, still pale. "What should we say?" For a moment Zorth kept staring at the human warship hanging motionless in the dark. It did not move. It did not posture. It simply remained there, silent and immense, as though it needed no demonstration of power because its existence was demonstration enough. Then Zorth exhaled shakily and gave the only order that mattered. "Tell them," he said, "we must never provoke the humans." Silence fell over the bridge of the Virian scout ship as High Captain Zorth stared at the monstrosity before them. The Indomitable hung in the void, utterly still, as if it had been waiting for them to understand what they had found. His crew obeyed his commands without hesitation, shutting down weapons, ceasing scans, reducing the vessel to the closest thing a warship could become to harmless. But even as the systems powered down, Zorth felt the truth settling into his bones. It was already too late. A ripple of energy shimmered across the hull of the human warship. Before anyone on the bridge could react, a transmission tore through their comms. The voice that emerged was cold, mechanical, unmistakably human. "Unidentified vessel. You have been scanning a Terran warship. State your purpose immediately. The bridge crew froze. One officer's claws slipped against his console. Another actually recoiled, as if the words themselves had crossed the void and struck him. Virian stealth fields were among the most advanced in known space. They masked emissions, distorted light, and bent detection systems into confusion. No species had ever pierced them in real time. No species had ever spoken directly into the teeth of a hidden Virian vessel and made it feel naked. But the humans had. And they did not sound surprised. Zortha's mind raced through possibilities, all of them bad. If he misspoke, if he hesitated, if he gave the wrong shade of defiance, the ship looming before them would erase his vessel before his crew even understood they were dead. He knew that now with a certainty so complete it felt like instinct. The Indomitable had not just seen them. It had measured them, weighed them, decided exactly how little of a threat they were. He forced his spines to flatten and turned to the communications officer. "Open a channel," he said. "And do not, under any circumstances, show hostility." A click echoed across the bridge. Zorth drew a breath and spoke. "This is High Captain Zorth of the Royan Exploration Fleet. We mean no harm. We were merely observing." The pause that followed was not long, but it felt surgical. Then the voice returned. "Observing." One word. Nothing more. Yet the tone carried something Zorth had not expected from humans in such a moment. Not fury. Not fear. Mockery. "Let me guess," the voice continued. "You thought we wouldn't notice. Thought your fancy cloaking tech made you invisible." A pit opened in Zortha's stomach. So that was how the humans saw them. Not as dangerous intruders. Not even as worthy spies. As children sneaking into a storm and believing the lightning blind. "That was not our intention," Zorth said smoothly, the lie leaving his mouth with practiced ease. "We have been monitoring many civilizations across the sector. Yours is simply of interest to us." He barely finished the sentence before the sensor board lit up. The Indomitable was powering up. Its engines flared with unnatural intensity, not the frantic surge of a ship preparing for battle, but the calm awakening of something enormous and fully certain of itself. Weapon systems began cycling through readiness checks. A targeting lock slammed onto the Virian ship. Then another. Then another. Dozens of firing solutions flooded the tactical screen, each one mapping a different escape vector, each one predicting where the scout ship would die if it tried to run. The bridge changed. All pretense vanished. Officers stared in open fear. One whispered a prayer to ancestors Zorth had not thought he believed in. Another simply gripped the edge of his station and said nothing at all. If the humans fired now, there would be no escape. The voice returned, softer this time, which somehow made it worse. "I suggest you pick another civilization to spy on." It was phrased like advice. It landed like a blade. Zorth clenched his jaw hard enough to ache. He had underestimated humanity. The entire Galactic Union had. These were not a fledgling species clawing upward through the old stages of development. These were not reckless primates who had lucked their way into military relevance. They were already there. And they were letting him live. "Understood," Zorth said carefully. "We will depart immediately." Another pause. Then, at last, the human voice softened by the smallest fraction. "Good choice. Now run along, little scout. And next time, remember who owns this sector." The transmission cut. Zorth did not waste a second. "Get us out of here. Now." The Virian ship spun away and the jump drive roared to life. As the stars stretched into violent streams of light, Zorth allowed himself one slow, shaking breath. Humanity was not merely dangerous. Humanity was something the galaxy had failed to name. The Virian scout ship emerged from jump light years away from the terrifying presence of the Indomitable, but relief never came with it. High Captain Zorth sat rigid in his command chair, staring at the sensor display as if the human warship might somehow still be there, hidden behind the numbers, waiting for him to make the mistake of breathing too easily. Around him, the bridge crew moved in brittle silence. No one spoke above a murmur. No one laughed. No one reached for the idle rituals officers usually clung to after danger passed. The ship was safe. No one believed it. Zortha's claws tapped once against the armrest, then stopped. "Send an encrypted transmission to High Command," he said. His communications officer hesitated only a moment. "What do we tell them, Captain?" Zorth kept his eyes forward. "The truth. The humans are not what we thought they were." The message was encoded and sent within moments. Then there was nothing left to do except wait, and waiting proved worse than the encounter itself. Every few minutes, someone on the bridge checked the long-range scans. Once, an officer actually flinched at a harmless energy fluctuation from a distant pulsar. The fear had already done its work. The Indomitable had not fired a single shot, yet its shadow had crossed the ship and remained there. It had been meant to be a simple reconnaissance mission. The Galactic Union had dismissed humanity as a lower-tier civilization, a species with potential perhaps, aggression certainly, but nothing the older powers could not handle if the need ever arose. Humans were supposed to be loud, divided, emotional creatures still dragging themselves out of adolescence. Their wars were meant to be ugly but primitive. Their progress was supposed to be uneven. Their ambition was supposed to outrun their ability. Zorth had believed all of that. Now every assumption felt rotten. Hours passed before the reply came. The encrypted packet arrived on the bridge display with the seal of High Command burned across it in crimson light. Zorth opened it himself. As he read, something cold slipped down his spine. You are ordered to report to the War Council immediately. Cease all further missions. The humans must be re-evaluated. For a moment he simply stared at the message. Around him, officers exchanged uneasy looks, reading his silence before they read his face. The War Council. Not Regional Command. Not Intelligence Review. The War Council. Only existential threats went before the War Council. The last time it had convened in full force was during the rise of the UAR hive, a parasitic species that had consumed entire systems before being purged at catastrophic cost. Entire fleets had burned to stop that nightmare. Worlds had been sterilized. Bloodlines had ended. Zorth had studied that conflict in military academies as one studies ancient disasters, with academic distance and the comfort of knowing the terror belonged to history. Now humanity was being placed in the same category. He rose from his chair. Prepare for immediate jump to Zaltorath, he ordered. No one questioned him. As the crew moved to comply, Zorth turned toward the forward viewport. Beyond it stretched the black infinity his people had crossed for centuries, believing themselves masters of strategy, students of war so refined that nothing truly dangerous could grow without their notice. They had built their identity on control, on calculation, on being the species that saw first, struck first, understood first. And yet the humans had risen under all of that certainty like a blade beneath a throat. The ship powered for jump, and still Zorth kept watching the stars. He found himself thinking not about the Indomitable's weapons, horrifying as they were, but about the restraint, the targeting locks, the mocking voice, the calm confidence of a species that had every opportunity to kill and had not bothered. That was what unsettled him most. Predators struck when they saw weakness. Empires punished intrusion. The humans had done neither. They had warned him. As if the destruction of his ship would have been trivial. As if the real message had been mercy. The engines deepened into a steady rising growl. The bridge lights dimmed for jump readiness. Zorth folded his hands behind his back to hide the tension in them. For the first time in his life, he did not feel like an officer of a dominant civilization. He felt like prey. And as the stars began to distort, one final thought settled into him with awful certainty. The worst part was this. The humans had not even begun to show their true strength yet. The Virian capital world Zaltorath gleamed beneath twin suns as High Captain Zorth's scout ship descended through layers of disciplined air traffic and military shielding. Below, the command complex rose from black stone like a weapon driven into the planet's surface, all obsidian spires and hard angles, its towers wrapped in banners bearing the sigils of conquest, strategy, and dominion. Under ordinary circumstances, being summoned there would have been the highest honor of Zorth's career. Today it felt like a funeral procession. He stepped from the landing ramp into a corridor of polished onyx, flanked by honor guards whose armor reflected him in fractured pieces. Their presence should have been ceremonial. Instead it felt like containment, as though the fear he carried might spread if left unattended. His boots clicked across the floor in a rhythm too sharp for comfort, carrying him toward the towering doors of the War Council chamber. When those doors opened, the scale of the moment finally settled in. 13 warlords sat around the central war table, each one a veteran of campaigns that had broken worlds and rewritten borders. At the head of them sat Grand Warlord Torval, his battle-scarred face as unmoving as carved metal, his gold eyes fixed on Zorth before a word had even been spoken. The chamber itself was vast and dim, lit by tactical displays and old victory standards. Normally it radiated power. Today it radiated tension. "You have seen something," Torval said, his voice a low growl that carried to every corner of the chamber. "Something that has shaken even you." Zorth stepped forward and clasped his hands behind his back to steady them. "I have, Grand Warlord. And I bring grave news." He activated the hollow projector. The image of the Indomitable flared above the war table in hard blue light. Beneath it rolled the scanner data his officers had captured before shutting everything down. Defensive composition, weapons layout, secondary systems, boarding architecture, tactical prediction matrices. As the information scrolled past, the mood in the chamber shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, but Zorth saw it. A pause too long before one warlord blinked. A tightening of jaws. A silence where scoffing should have been. This, Zorth said, is a human warship. A single vessel. It possesses armor designed to absorb energy attacks, kinetic weapons capable of bypassing standard shielding, and boarding systems meant to eliminate crews before a target ship is even destroyed. A murmur moved through the chamber. Torval leaned forward slightly. You suggest that a single human vessel rivals one of our dreadnoughts? Zorth met his gaze. No, Grand Warlord. I suggest that it surpasses them. That broke the silence. Warlord Vayer, notorious for his campaigns against lesser species, let out a contemptuous snort. Absurd. Humanity is young. Their technology is crude. Even if they have improved, they lack the strategic discipline to pose a true threat. Zorth turned toward him, and for the first time since entering the chamber, he let some of his anger show. Then explain this, he said. How did they detect us through our stealth fields? How did they lock weapons on our ship before we even realized they were tracking us? Vayer opened his mouth then closed it. Zorth stepped closer to the table. They did not fire upon us. They allowed us to leave. Torval's expression darkened slightly. And what does that tell you? Zorth looked around the chamber, making each warlord hold his gaze. It tells me the humans are not simply warlike savages. They are not reacting. They are not improvising. They are not frightened children waving heavier weapons than they understand. They are confident. They knew they could destroy us and they chose not to. He let the words settle before delivering the part that mattered. That restraint is what makes them terrifying. The room went still again. Because restraint means control, Zorth said. It means they are waiting for something. Preparing for something. And whatever they are preparing for, they have already built themselves into a species the rest of us failed to recognize. The hollow image of the Indomitable rotated slowly above the table, cold and patient. For the first time in Vurian history, a war council session approached its end without a call to mobilize fleets, without demands for immediate retaliation, without the comforting violence of certainty. There was no order to strike first. No declaration of supremacy. No easy path back into the old arrogance. Only 13 warlords staring at a human ship and realizing they did not know how to defeat what it represented. And somewhere inside that silence, Zorth understood the real wound. The humans already knew that. The War Council chamber emptied slowly, but the unease did not leave with the departing warlords. It lingered in the air like the scent of blood after battle. High Captain Zorth remained beside the war table, claws resting against the cold edge of black metal, while the hologram of the Indomitable turned above it in soundless, patient rotation. Grand Warlord Torval had not moved since the others began filing out. His gold eyes stayed fixed on the human vessel as though he were trying to stare through the ship and into the mind that had built it. At last he spoke. You believe they are preparing for war. It was not phrased as a question. Zorth straightened. I believe they are preparing for something worse. Torval's gaze shifted to him, sharp as a drawn blade. Explain. Zorth reached across the command surface and altered the projection. The image of the Indomitable broke apart into layered scans of its internal systems. Power relays. Redundant cores. Structural reinforcement grids. Hull density analysis. Heat dispersal patterns. Damage control routing. On the surface, it was the anatomy of an exceptionally brutal warship. Beneath that, it revealed something else. This vessel was not merely built to destroy, Zorth said carefully. It was built to survive. Torval said nothing. The armor plating suggests the humans expect overwhelming firepower to be used against them. The redundant systems indicate they are preparing for catastrophic internal damage and continued function under extreme conditions. The quantity of kinetic weaponry suggests they anticipate enemies with countermeasures unlike standard shields. Every design decision points in the same direction. Torval's voice lowered. They are expecting an enemy greater than us. Zorth nodded once. Yes. That was the moment the room changed. Not loudly. Not with panic. But with the terrible stillness that comes when a possibility becomes too complete to dismiss. Torval turned away from the projection and looked back toward the chamber doors, now sealed behind the last of the departing council members. If that is true, he said, then everything we believe about human militarization is wrong. It may be, Zorth answered, that humanity never armed itself against the Union at all. Torval's jaw tightened. He began issuing orders at once. Begin deep intelligence sweeps of all human territories, he said, voice suddenly edged with iron. I want every intercepted transmission, every shipyard manifest, every military movement analyzed. Strip the data to the bone. I want to know what they are building, how fast they are building it, and why. Commands flashed across the war table as he spoke. Hidden listening posts. Reconnaissance webs. Archive access. Strategic analysts. The machinery of a paranoid state waking all at once. Then Torval looked at Zorth. And you, he said, I am assigning you a new task. Zorth's spine stiffened. Whatever is required, Grand Warlord. Torval stepped closer. For all his size and authority, he lowered his voice until it was almost a whisper, forcing Zorth to lean in to hear it. I need you to find out what the humans are afraid of. The words landed harder than any threat spoken that day. For a heartbeat Zorth simply stared at him. Not what the humans were planning. Not how many ships they had. Not whether they could be defeated. What they feared. Because if a species capable of building the indomitable was still preparing as though it had not yet reached safety, then somewhere beyond the edge of known space there existed a pressure great enough to shape monsters into guardians. Zorth felt the implications open beneath him like a void. Far away, deep inside human-controlled space, Captain Elias Grant stood on the bridge of the Indomitable and watched the sensor logs from the encounter replay across his tactical screen. Around him, officers moved in quiet efficiency, though Zorth was not there to see it. The human captain studied the final energy signature of the retreating Vurian vessel and folded his arms. They're starting to ask questions, his first officer murmured. Grant did not look away from the data. Let them. The officer hesitated. Do you think they suspect? Grant's eyes shifted toward a sealed cluster of classified reports glowing faintly at the side of his console. Files buried deeper than Fleet Command. Deeper than diplomatic access. Reports that held the truth of why humanity had stopped expanding, why they had turned colonies into fortresses, why ships like the Indomitable existed at all. He looked back into the darkness beyond the viewport. They'll find out soon enough, he said. Zorth sat alone in his personal chamber aboard the Vurian dreadnought Sovereign Wrath, staring at the intelligence feeds flowing across his console in thin ribbons of pale light. The War Council had given him access to archives usually sealed even to senior commanders, and the deeper he went, the less stable the old picture of humanity became. He had expected weapons reports, fleet counts, intercepted military signals. He found those. But the real terror lived in the pattern beneath them. The humans were hiding something. Over the past 50 years, their technological progress had accelerated at a rate that made no strategic sense if conquest was their goal. They had gone from crude planetary defenses to warships capable of outmaneuvering major Union fleets. Their hulls were built for endurance. Their weapons were refined for maximum lethality. Their colonies bristled with orbital defenses. Their shipyards produced war vessels in numbers that should have preceded expansion, annexation, domination. Yet their borders had barely moved. Zorth enlarged the star maps and stared at them in disbelief. Every major spacefaring species followed the same historical pattern. Expand. Claim resources. Fortify. Push outward again. It was the natural rhythm of any civilization that wanted power among the stars. The Varians had done it. The old empires had done it. Even the most diplomatic species eventually built themselves outward like spreading fire. But humanity had not. Their fleet numbers were rising at an alarming pace, yet they were not invading neighboring sectors. They were not pressing claims into weak territories. They were not consuming frontier worlds simply because they could. They were hardening what they already possessed. Reinforcing colonies. Building fortress stations. Manufacturing ships meant to absorb punishment and remain operational inside it. They were waiting. Zorth's claws tapped against the console. If humanity was preparing for war, it should have been against the dominant powers of the Union. The Varians. The old houses. Rival civilizations large enough to justify this scale of militarization. But every report pointed away from that conclusion. There were no hidden invasion corridors. No massed assault groups near Union space. No preparations for imperial expansion. Only defenses layered on defenses, production behind armor, logistics routed for attrition. Then who? His console chimed. A classified transmission from the intelligence network appeared under maximum encryption. Zorth frowned and opened it. The first image froze him where he sat. Deep space scans. A sector far beyond human-controlled space. A region marked in the records as uninhabited for millennia. It was no longer empty. The pictures showed wreckage so enormous it distorted scale itself. Hull fragments larger than cities drifted in black silence. None of the designs matched human, Virian, or any known civilization in the galactic record. The structures were angular yet twisted, scarred by damage that did not resemble conventional battle. Some sections looked peeled apart. Others seemed torn open at a molecular level, as if matter itself had been persuaded to forget it belonged together. Zorth leaned closer, pulse hammering. Then he saw the signatures. Faint energy traces flickered among the debris. Active signals. Weak but unmistakable. Whatever had destroyed those impossible ships had not vanished with them. Something was still out there, moving through the bones of a dead battlefield the galaxy had never known existed. A cold understanding settled over him piece by piece. The Indomitable had not been built for war against the Union. It had been built to fight that. And for the first time, Zorth understood the meaning of the human mercy shown to him. It had not been arrogance. It had not been theater. It had been a warning from a species already standing watch at the edge of something vast and murderous. Humanity had let him leave because destroying a scout ship would have taught the Union nothing. Fear, if correctly aimed, might. Zorth exhaled slowly and forced his hands still. He needed proof. He needed confirmation strong enough to break through the pride of empires. Scans and theories would not be enough. If he returned with suspicions, the council would argue. Delay. Reframe. Pretend. And delay, he now understood, might be fatal. There was only one way forward. He had to speak to the humans. Not as a spy. Not as an observer. As a commander who had finally realized that the nightmare was not the fleet humanity had built. It was the thing that had convinced them to build it. Deep inside human space, aboard the warship Indomitable, Captain Elias Grant stood in the dim glow of his bridge and watched a lone Royan vessel enter the edge of Terran-controlled territory. No escort. No weapons primed. No aggressive posture. Just one ship moving forward with the kind of caution that meant it was either very brave or very desperate. His first officer folded his arms and stared at the tactical display. Brave, she muttered. Grant's mouth curved faintly. Or desperate. He leaned toward the console. Open a channel. A moment later the view screen flickered to life, and High Captain Zorth appeared. His reptilian face was composed, but Grant saw it immediately in the eyes. The certainty was gone. In its place sat something far more useful. Unease sharpened by understanding. Captain Grant, Zorth said, voice measured. We need to talk. Grant tilted his head. Do we? Zorth did not flinch. I have seen the wreckage. I know what you are building your ships for. I know there is something out there. And I know you have been hiding it from the rest of the galaxy. The bridge fell silent. Grant let out a slow breath and motioned for outgoing audio to mute. His first officer looked at him. Well, she said quietly, there goes the secret. Grant kept his eyes on the screen. The Royans were sharper than he had expected. He had known the encounter with the scout ship would start questions, but not that it would lead one of their captains all the way into human space this quickly. It complicated things. Then again, maybe complication had become unavoidable the moment the galaxy started noticing that humanity was not behaving like an empire. He unmuted the channel. You want answers, Grant said. Fine. But once I tell you the truth, there's no going back. Zorth's expression held. I understand. Grant studied him for one more second, then nodded. All right. Let me tell you about the things in the dark. Later, in a secure command chamber deep within the Indomitable, Grant sat across from Zorth beneath low tactical lighting and opened files no non-human had ever been permitted to see. The Royan commander remained outwardly still, but tension lived in the set of his shoulders, in the flattening of his spines, in the way his claws hovered just above the edge of the table without touching it. Grant leaned forward, fingers interlocked. We first picked up strange signals near the edges of explored space about 80 years ago, he said. At first we thought they were stellar anomalies. Background noise. Then ships started disappearing. Zorth narrowed his eyes. Pirates. Grant shook his head. That's what we thought too. Until we found the wrecks. He activated the holo projector. The room filled with images of twisted metal and shattered hulls, ships so badly destroyed they no longer looked like machines. Some appeared scorched by energy fire. Others were peeled open in long ragged strips, as though some impossible force had pulled them apart with deliberate patience. One vessel had a breach running through its center so clean and unnatural that it looked less like damage and more like erasure. Zorth's spines flattened. This was not war. Grant's expression darkened. No. It was extermination. The images changed again. This time they showed helmet recordings from human exploration teams. The footage shook with panicked movement. Lights flashed across dark corridors. Breath came fast over comm channels. Then came the sounds. Gunfire. Screams. The wet metallic shriek of something that did not belong to any biology the galaxy had catalogued. Just before the feed cut, a shape moved across the frame. Zorth went still. "What did you find?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. Grant exhaled slowly. "At first we thought it was an ancient war. Some dead civilization that destroyed itself. Then they woke up." The holo shifted one final time. A grainy long-range recording appeared. A human patrol fleet approaching what looked like a derelict vessel drifting among wreckage. It floated motionless at first, enormous and lifeless, larger than any dreadnought Zorth had ever seen. Then it moved. The thing unfolded. Jagged plates split apart like muscle opening beneath armor. Appendages extended from its body, some lined with weapons, others ending in grotesque clawed structures. And inside the breaches in its hull, shapes stirred. Elongated figures. Twisted remains of beings that had once belonged to other species, their forms absorbed into something new and wrong. Then the attack began. Human ships opened fire. Energy beams bent away. Kinetic rounds dissolved before impact. When the thing struck back, the Terran vessels did not simply explode. Their hulls withered. Metal corroded. Internal atmospheres turned lethal. Screams filled the room and then the recording cut to black. Grant looked at Zorth across the silence. "We call them the Erebus," he said. "And they're coming." Zorth sat in stunned silence. The final image of the Erebus still burned into his mind like a wound that refused to close. All his life he had believed the Royan Dominion stood at the peak of galactic power. Their fleets had broken rivals, their strategies had outlasted empires, their names had become synonymous with control. But everything he had just seen reduced that certainty to ash. The Erebus were not another enemy to be measured by borders, fleet tonnage, or political leverage. They were something older, hungrier, and utterly indifferent to the systems the galaxy used to understand war. Captain Grant watched him carefully from across the chamber, saying nothing. At last Zorth found his voice. "You should have told the Galactic Union." The words came slow and hard. Grant let out a humorless breath. "And what would they have done?" Zorth opened his mouth but Grant kept going. "They would have dismissed us. Called us paranoid. Accused us of fear-mongering. Or worse, they would have panicked and thrown fleets at something they didn't understand." His eyes hardened. "Either way people die. Fast." Zorth hated that the human was right. The Union was vast, political, slow to move unless disaster was already at its throat. The old powers debated until momentum became history. The councils argued over wording while battlefields filled with bodies. Had humanity revealed the Erebus too early, the warning might have vanished into arrogance. Or it might have triggered exactly the kind of blind retaliation that would have fed the nightmare. So instead, Zorth said, "You prepared in secret." Grant nodded. "We built ships like the Indomitable. We stopped expanding and started fortifying. Every new colony became a fortress. Every outpost became a defensive line." His jaw tightened. "Because we don't know when the Erebus will arrive in full force. Only that they will." A chill moved through Zorth. The Royans had always defined strength as dominance. But what sat across from him now was something colder than dominance. It was endurance sharpened into doctrine. Humanity had looked at extinction and chosen logistics, steel and time. Zorth's claws curled against the edge of the table. "Have the Erebus reached your inner worlds yet?" Grant's silence answered before his words did. "How long?" Zorth asked. Grant rubbed at his temples, exhaustion surfacing for the first time. "If our projections are right, maybe a decade. Maybe less. A decade. 10 years before the darkness reached the heart of civilization." Zorth straightened slowly, his mind already racing ahead. The Dominion had to be warned. Not with fragments. Not with pride. With the full weight of what he had seen. And not only the Dominion. The entire Galactic Union had to hear it. Every species. Every fleet. Every soldier still clinging to old rivalries while something in the dark moved closer. He met Grant's gaze. "You let me leave before. That was a warning." Grant said nothing. Zorth inhaled deeply. "Now I am asking you to let me leave again. But this time so I can fight." Grant studied him for a long moment. Then he gave a single, slow nod. "Then move fast," the human captain said. "Because time is running out." 1 week later, Zorth stood once more before the Royan War Council, But this time the chamber felt different. The old skepticism was still there, yet it no longer filled the room alone. Now it had to share space with evidence. With recordings. With wreckage. With the impossible shape of a threat too monstrous to laugh away. When Warlord Vayer snarled that humans were deceivers and this could still be a ploy, Zorth slammed his fist into the war table so hard the projection shuddered. "You think I fear humans?" he roared. "I saw what they saw. I heard the screams. I watched ships torn apart like dry leaves. That is not deception. That is death itself." Silence followed. Grand Warlord Torval rose to his full height. "Then we summon the full might of the Dominion," he declared. "And we bring this to the Galactic Union. If the humans speak the truth, then we all stand on the edge of annihilation." 5 years later, in high orbit above Royan Prime,